La Cucamonga, La Cucamonga. 2-for-1 special today. Whee! And beep-a-dee! Yeah, I appreciate you guys smashing the like button on that earlier video that I did, the Michigan preview. I said if it hit 100 likes, I would do a second one today. It hit 100 in almost no time, so here I am, back out here in Grandma's garage for a second preview and prediction video for you guys today. Now, I've done a couple of SEC teams. I've done a Big Ten team. I've done an ACC team. I've done a Big 12 team. Yet to do a Pac-12 team. Gonna fix that now. When I think of the Pac-12, and this is probably true for you too, two words come to mind almost immediately. That's right, women's softball. But we're not gonna talk about that today. We're gonna stick to football for the purposes of this video. But our first Pac-12 preview and prediction video is gonna start right now, and it is the Oregon Ducks. Hey, good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on YouTube today, so thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Subscribe to this channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year. Yes, I'm a Georgia fan. You don't have to type it in the comment section. I'm well aware, I promise. I'm actually the one that hung this stuff up back here, and I know it's there. Thank you for letting me know, though. Actually, I'm not too worried about getting beat up in the comment section of this video because there's just not that many Pac-12 fans around here. Let's just be honest. Of the 5 major conferences, this is not meant as an insult. No offense to people like Small Nappy. We do have some very loyal, hardcore, dedicated college football fans from the Pac-12 on this channel. But in general, I think there's less hardcore college football fans out west in the Pac-12 than there is in the other 4 of the major conferences. So I don't really have to worry about getting beat up in this video. That being said, this is one of the hardest ones I've done yet. Pac-12 was hard to figure out. I've been saying for the last couple of years, I think each year there's 2 or 3 really good teams in the Pac-12. Rarely is there an elite team, a handful of average teams, and a handful of really, really bad teams. And it makes it hard sort of to do these preview and prediction videos, especially when I'm doing like the first one in the conference, because I have to keep in mind, you know, how I think other teams are gonna be. Because, you know, when I make this prediction here, for example, we're doing Oregon today. They play Stanford, right? Well, at some point, I'm probably going to do a Stanford preview and prediction, so I have to remember, okay, Oregon, did I pick Oregon to beat Stanford or lose to Stanford? I remember all that when I get ready to do Stanford, so this one was a little difficult, but, you know me, there's nothing I can't do. There's nothing I don't know, too, and if I don't know it, I'm not going to admit that. I'll just Google it. So, yeah, what are we doing?
Oregon preview.
Oh, Oregon, yeah. All right, well, let's do this. We'll wrap up last season. We'll talk briefly about some off-season stuff, what the roster looks like for this year. Then I'll put the schedule up on the screen and we'll get going. Last year you were 9-4, 5-4 in the conference, right? 3 of your 4 losses were on the road. Who'd you lose to? Lost to Stanford at home in overtime. Then you lost on the road at Washington State, on the road at Arizona, and on the road at Utah. Washington State and Arizona blew you out. I think Arizona beat you 40-something to 15. That was hard to understand. So yeah, 3 of your 4 losses coming on the road. 2 of your losses, no, 1 of your losses coming in overtime. You actually had a win in overtime against a different team. How'd I do with my Oregon prediction last year versus how it worked out? Well, I didn't get any wrong because I didn't do an Oregon one of these last year. I was surprised when I went back and looked. I did 37 of these. I went and looked them up. I did 37 of these last year, but for whatever reason, I didn't get around to doing Oregon. So I apologize for that, but remedied that situation this year. If I did do Oregon, I couldn't find it. So I didn't do that, so nothing to compare it to in terms of how I did last year. But 9-4, like I mentioned, some disappointing losses. Some like Washington State. Most people probably had that pegged as a win for Oregon heading into the season. Of course, Washington State ended up having a really, really good year. Not embarrassing to lose that game. Utah was pretty good too. No real shame in losing that one. The Stanford and the Arizona games are the ones you'd like to have back, right? If you're an Oregon fan. Really hard to understand how you lost those 2 games. Stanford had Bryce Love last year and some other pieces, but they just, Stanford never looked right last year to me. They were not a very good team. One that you probably should have won, but you let it get away. Now you beat Washington in overtime. That was probably the best team you played. Washington or Washington State. Lost to Washington State, beat Washington in overtime. beat Michigan in the Red Box Bowl 7-6. Man, what a boring game that must have been. Of course, no one watched it. If they did, Red Box Bowl, I hope they rented it. I hope nobody bought that game. I hope they rented it and took it back the next day to the Red Box. Jesus. Mario Cristobal, that was his first year as the full-time head coach. He went 9-4. He took over at the end of the previous season when Willie Taggart, for no reason at all, was plucked away from Oregon by Florida State. Man, best thing that's happened to Oregon, isn't it? Yeah, getting rid of that guy. What a disaster Willie Taggart is. That guy doesn't know what he's doing. Anyway, so it was Mario Cristobal's first year. He was made head coach really because of his recruiting ability. And it was sort of keep your fingers crossed and hope he can coach type of thing. 9-4. Not terrible. Now, Oregon, of course, made the playoffs way back in 2014, right? Fast forward 2 years from that to 2016, they had a 4-win season. So it went downhill real quick. Then, of course, what happened in 17? Well, Willie Taggart happened. No sense talking about that. You got rid of that. You took that trash out. Lucky for you. And then, of course, 9-4 last year, like we mentioned. So the 2 years prior, before Cristobal took over, were 7 wins and 4 wins. He gets you to 9 in his first year. Expectations are sky high at Oregon this year, especially after the recruiting you guys have had in the last couple of years. We'll go ahead and mention that real quick. 7th in the country in recruiting last year. That's astronomical for Oregon. I mean, that's unbelievable. The number 1 recruit in the nation, is it Trayvon Thibodeau?
Trayvon Thibodeau.
Now, some people had Nolan Smith as number 1. Some people had Thibodeau. There's not really much point in arguing over who's really number 1. The point is, those were 2 of the best recruits in all of America. You got one of them in Thibodeau, and he's probably going to play a lot this year because you need some pass rush help, which we'll talk about in just a second. He's a defensive end / outside linebacker, depending on what you decide to do with him. So you finished 7th in recruiting. Next closest to you in terms of the Pac-12 was 16th with Washington. USC was 20th. Stanford was 21st. There was no other Pac-12 teams even in the top 30. So you're sitting at 7th. Next closest is Washington at 16. You're lapping the field in terms of recruiting. It looks like if Mario Cristobal can coach, if his coaching ability can match his recruiting ability, we could be looking at a run about to start for Oregon, similar to what we saw under Chip Kelly, where they're going to be winning 11-plus games a year and dominating the Pac-12 for a 3, 4, 5-year period. That's what it looks like. We'll, again, 1 year, you can't really judge a coach solely off of 1 year. I get that. It looks like things are heading in the right direction, though. Well, let's see what you lost last year, what's coming back, and what you need to improve on, things like that. Justin Herbert. Man, this is probably, I've mentioned this a bunch of times this offseason. People talk about what a great recruiter Mario Cristobal is, and I agree. Greatest recruiting job he ever done may have been getting Justin Herbert to come back for his senior year. The guy would have been a first-round pick without question. Maybe number 1 overall, although Arizona is so stupid, they probably would have drafted Kyler Murray anyway, even knowing they could have got Justin Herbert. My guess, Herbert would be a New York Giant right now if he'd have come out instead of Daniel Jones. We'll never know. No point debating it. But Herbert, 3,100 yards last year. That's not eye-popping, but Oregon ran the ball a lot. 29 touchdowns, completed 60% of his passes with it, which isn't terrible, but you'd like to see that 6 or 7 points higher. If you look at your elite quarterbacks in college football, Trevor Lawrence, Tavai throw Fromm in there if you want. These people are completing between 65 and 70%. He completed 60%. Now, according to Oregon, because I don't think anybody officially tracks this type of thing, but according to Oregon, there were 52 drops. That's like 4 a game. So that's a lot of drops. That would be enough to bump you up if the receivers can start hanging on to the ball. We'll talk about your receiver situation here right now. You lose this Dylan Mitchell. Now, he was a record-setting receiver for you. So yeah, I think he had the most career yards last year in school history, over 1,100 and something. Over 1,100 something yards. You get a couple of guys back, this Johnny Johnson, Schooler, they return. They're okay. I don't think any of them are elite. I don't think either of them are as good as the guy you lost, Dylan Mitchell. But you bring in, you got several young guys, but and then a grad transfer. But the 2 people I want to talk about in particular, this grad transfer, Jajuan Johnson, and true freshman Micah Pittman. I think both of them will play early, often, and a lot. And I think both of them can be really, really good in Oregon's offense with Justin Herbert at quarterback. I don't know if you'll have a receiver get to the 1184 mark again, but it wouldn't surprise me if overall the passing numbers go up. In other words, Herbert had 3,100 last year. I don't think anybody would be surprised if you see Justin Herbert get closer to 3,500 or 3,600 this year. He's expected to do even better He's a senior. This is his last year. Big things are expected from Justin Herbert. I think the wide receivers will be a beneficiary of that. Offensive line, maybe the best in all of college football. It's definitely the best in the Pac-12. It's definitely top 5 in all of college football. These are opinions. There's, of course, no way to, scientifically or objectively prove these things. Anybody you talk to that's got any sense, though, knows that Oregon has an absolutely elite offensive line. You return 4 of your 5 starters from last year. And you get that guy back that got hurt last year. I didn't write his name down, and I can't remember it. Oregon fans will know who I'm talking about. But he may have been your best offensive lineman. He got hurt halfway through the season when you were like 4-1 or 5-1 and something like that. And then you went 3-3 the rest of the season without him. You get him back. That's a huge benefit right there. But you've got a ton of talent, a ton of experience. 3, this is wild. 3 of your offensive line starters are 4-year starters. Now, it's rare that any team starts a true freshman on the offensive line, much less 2 freshmen. You started 3 freshmen on your offensive line now 3 seasons ago. Now, they're all seniors now. I mean, this is unbelievable to have 3 4-year starters on the offensive line. That tells me they're really, really good. They're really, really talented. And they play together really, really well. A ton of cohesion. This is rare that you have offensive linemen playing together for this long because you usually don't start for 4 years on an offensive line. This will help your running back situation, which is good news because I think you need help at the running back situation. C.J. Verdell and Travis Dyer, your 2 running backs. But now Verdell is sort of your every down running back, right? He's your workhorse, your between the tackles type of guy. Travis Dyer is more one of these shifty type guys, like a 3rd down type of a deal, quick, fast, shifty, not necessarily a guy that you're going to want to hand the ball off to 20 times a game, but a guy that can be a home run hitter in certain situations. So I think obviously we'll see a bunch of those guys who both returned from last year. And then you got true freshman Sean Dollars. I think he was he the 4th highest? No, he wasn't the 4th highest. Anyway, he was a very highly recruited running back out of high school in the 2019 class. And running back is one of those positions that doesn't have a huge learning curve. I talked about this in the Michigan video, from high school to college, right? If you can see holes, if you have a jump cut, if you have a juke, if you have a good stiff arm, if you're fast, then you can play running back year 1 in college, right? You learn a few plays, that kind of thing. The issue you see with a lot of true freshman running backs is like pass protections, audibles, things like that. Maybe learning to catch the ball out of the backfield. But generally speaking, if you're good, you can play as a true freshman. And I think we'll see a lot of this guy, Sean Dollars, this year. Where's Sean Dollars from? I had to write this down. Rancho Cucamonga. La Cucamonga, La Cucamonga. Let me try to be serious for a minute, though. Defense. Listen to this weird stat I found here. This is impressive. You held your opponents, in the red zone, defensive red zone. Once your opponents got into the red zone, you held them to a field goal 43% of the time. That's unbelievable. That's amazing. You must have played Georgia all 12 weeks of the year. Georgia can't score no touchdowns in the red zone. Remember the Florida game? Remember the Auburn game? Remember every other game? I fixed that this year, but this is crazy. 43% of the time you held them to a field goal in the red zone. That's unbelievable. Now, that's the bright spot. You got to improve. Rush yards allowed were way too high. Your 3rd down rate on 3rd down was terrible, actually. You got to get better in those situations. Now, in terms of the 3rd down conversion rate, I know something that might help you there. Name of Thibodeau. Yeah, great pass rush is great for 3rd down efficiency numbers, ain't it? Yeah, it is. You're on your 3rd defensive coordinator in 4 years. That's not a positive sign. Well, what I mean, that doesn't mean this Avalos guy from Boise State won't be good. It means as far as development, cohesion on this defense, seniors are on their 3rd defensive coordinator. That's you want to avoid that if you can. That's not a good thing, is it? No. Defensive line, nose tackle Jordan Scott. This is one of my favorite players on your defense. He reminds me a lot of John Atkins. Georgia fans will remember who that is. If you're not a Georgia fan, he was the nose tackle that Georgia had in 16 and 17. 2017 in particular, Roquan Smith gets all the credited inside linebacker for having 500 tackles, and Lord knows he was a generational talent. But what doesn't show up on the stat sheet is a nose tackle like Jonathan, like John Atkins, like we had. like Jordan Scott, like you have, a block eater. The guy can eat up 2 or 3 offensive linemen every single play, which can do wonders for an inside linebacking unit. So I really like this guy that you have there. And of course, defensive end, outside linebacker, everybody's wanting to see Kayvon Thibodeau. Defensive end in high school, I think. So we'll see. Probably play either or, defensive end or outside linebacker. We'll see what Oregon decides to do with him. On the inside at linebacker, you got Troy Dyer. This is crazy here. He led your team in tackles last year. That's not crazy. That's great. That's really who you want leading your team in tackles, is inside linebacker. He had 50 more tackles, though, than anybody else on your team. He had 115 tackles. Next closest guy had 65. That's wild. It's like Kenneth Murray Jr. at Oklahoma. You know, the guy's got 1 million tackles, and nobody else on the defense knows what they're doing at Oklahoma. Not saying that's the case with you guys, but you do have to improve on that side of the ball, though. I mean, Isaac Slade, Maltasia, here we go with these names again. I don't know, he was injured last year, but he's really good, though. DJ Johnson, I'm naming your linebackers. I don't want me to read the roster. There's no sense in doing that. I think you're okay at the linebacker position. I don't think you're great. I don't think it's a weakness. I think it's good enough, and I just leave it at that. Defensive back, you got to replace that Amadi guy that left last year. Played sort of a nickel thing, kind of the leader of your secondary. You got some guys, I think, that'll be able to do it. 2 of your corners are 3-year starters, so they've been, they'll be juniors this year. They both started as freshmen, started last year as sophomores. This will be their 3rd year starting at corner, so that should be a position of strength for you there. And then this Holland, is it Javon Holland, safety, sort of a ball hawk guy, roams around, a lot of interceptions, that kind of thing. So high expectations, a lot coming back on offense, a lot coming back on defense. Several areas you want to improve, but if you're an Oregon fan, you got to be positive about the way things are looking for the 2019 season. And we're going to talk about that right now. So let's go ahead and put the schedule up on the screen. You guys know how this works. We're going to go through it game by game. I'm going to give you a winner for every single one. My overall goal really is to try to figure out what their final record would be. But to do that, I'm going to pick a winner and loser for every single game, and we'll see where we land with that. All right, big one, week 1 here. This is a huge game, not just for Oregon, but for the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is in desperate need of some respect on a national level. Again, not a trash talk video here, but people's opinion of the Pac-12 is not very high. I'm just going to let you know that. I spend 365 days a year talking to football fans from all over the place, and it's hard to find one that will even try to convince anybody that the Pac-12 is really, really good. The opinion of the Pac-12 is just not very high right now. Some high-profile losses in the playoffs with Oregon and Washington, 2 games that weren't really close. Well, Oregon actually did win a playoff game before losing in the national title game, so let's give them some credit. But and then, of course, Auburn beats Washington to open up the season last year. Now it's Oregon's turn to try to see what they can do against the SEC here. Neutral site game against Auburn. I'm not very high on Auburn in general, okay? Now, they do have an elite defensive line. Could be the best defensive line Oregon sees all year. But that's the strength of your team, offensive line. Maybe that can neutralize that. What else is a possible benefit for Oregon in this game? Well, you've got Justin Herbert, one of the most experienced quarterbacks in college football. Auburn, regardless of who they play, Nix or Gatewood, or both, neither of them have any or next to no experience at all, and certainly no starts. So you got an advantage there. Speed, I'm going to go with Auburn. I know Oregon, talk to me about the speed. You don't have the speed that Auburn has. You just don't. I like Auburn's wide receivers. Their defensive line and linebackers are absolutely legit. Running back, I think they need a little bit of help. We'll see. And their offensive line was a work in progress last year, and that looks to continue to be the case this year. The biggest storyline surrounding Auburn this year is Gus Malzahn, and can he keep his job? Unfortunately for Oregon, Gus Malzahn starts off on the good foot. I have you losing week 1 to Auburn. This is a game that could go either way. Like last year, the Washington-Auburn game was one of the hardest week 1 games for me to pick, and I went back and forth all offseason and said, I think it'd be a close game either way. I think this will be a close game too. I'm going to go with Auburn. I'm going to fall for it, I guess. I don't think the Pac-12 that overall is that good. I'm high on Oregon. I think you can still have a really good year. I got to see you win some of these high-profile games, though, and until you do, I can't go with you here. Give me Gus Malzahn in the barn. All right, that's the bad news. String of good news here. Couple other non-conference games here right after that, both at home, Nevada and Montana. Win. Not going to spend a lot of time educating you about Nevada and Montana, other than to tell you, believe me, you're not the only one that doesn't know anything about their football team. Not very many people do. because there's not much of a reason to, and they got no business competing with Oregon. You're 2-1 after week 3. All right, on the road at Stanford, and this is one I went back and forth on. I think Oregon is one of those teams that talent-wise could go 12-0. But I think they've got some issues in certain places, and I think teams like Oregon have to learn to win. Mario Cristobal is still a young head coach. Teams like that, more times than not, lose a couple of games a year that most people either think they're going to win or have a good chance to win. I went back and forth on this one. It's on the road. I'm just not that high on Stanford this year. They lose a lot too. I was disappointed in them last year. I still think David Shaw is one of the most underrated coaches around, but I gave you a win on the road against the tree. All right, then you play 2 pretty bad teams, but didn't Cal? No, Cal beat Washington last year, I think, not you. Anyway, Cal and Colorado win. Colorado's breaking in a new coach, Georgia defensive coordinator Mel Tucker. This is the second time they've gone to the UGA. Well, no, that was Colorado State, wasn't it? Yep. But Mel Tucker's out there. God bless him. I wish him nothing but the best. But he doesn't have the horses to beat you. I got you winning at home against Cal and winning at home against the Buffalo. All right, I forgot to mention you had a bye week after Stanford. I apologize. Everybody's got 2 bye weeks this year. It's not a change in college football. It's just the way the calendar falls this year to get the football season to start on the date they want it to start on and end on the date they want it to end on. There's 1 extra Saturday in there, so every team gets 2 bye weeks. Yours comes between that road game at Stanford and the home game against Cal. So that's through your first 6 games, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have you 5-1 with your only loss being the season opening neutral site game to the Barn. Week 7, man, things get tough here. This is a tough 3 stretch of games here. Your next 3 games: at Washington, home against Washington State, at Southern Cal. I can tell you right now, if you can go 2-1 in this stretch of games, you're a pretty good team. These are not easy games. I'm down on Southern Cal in general, but talent-wise, they're as good as anybody else in the Pac-12. And you can't convince me otherwise. I think coaching is their issue. I think they've got some other outside stuff going on. Washington State is an overachiever. They lose an all-world quarterback last year in Minshew, but one thing we know about Mike Leach, he's going to find a way to move the ball up and down the field and score some points every single year, period. And Washington, of course, loaded. Jacob Eason at quarterback. They seem to be in a spot now where they're winning 10-plus games every single year. And 2 of these games are on the road. If you can find a way to go 2-1 here, I think that's great. If you go 3-0, if you go 3-0 here, you'll probably win the rest of your games, and you would finish then at 11-1. I have you losing, though, this first one on the road at Washington. I think they get you. It's a road game. You got these 2 home games here that are against nobodies. You turn around, go on the road to a rivalry game. I think you catch an L at Washington, but I do think you win the next 2. At home against Washington State, I think you get a big win there. And then on the road at Southern Cal, I think you get another win there. I'm just not high on Clay Helton. I think this is his last year there, getting ready for the Urban Meyer show in Los Angeles. So anyway, I do have you dropping that 1 at Washington, so that puts you, through 9 games, 7-2. All right, and then you have your last bye week before you head into your final stretch of games. 3 more conference games, this time 2 at home and 1 on the road. Arizona at home, at Arizona State, and home against Oregon State. Oregon State, one of the worst Power 5 teams in America. You're going to win that one. There won't be any issue there. Arizona and Arizona State, middle of the road Pac-12 teams. One of these teams is probably going to win 7, maybe 8 games. The other one is going to struggle to make bowl games. It's just that's the group of teams Arizona and Arizona State fall into. It's not a knock on Arizona and Arizona State. That's just the way it is right now. I'm not super high on either one of their coaches, although I will admit Herm Edwards did a little bit better last year than I thought he would. Kevin Sumlin, I don't know what this guy's doing. He's got Khalil Tate, won't use him, won't let him run around. I don't know what his problem is. Maybe we'll find out this year. I don't know. I think you lose at Arizona State to the Fighting Herm Edwardses, though. I got you beating Arizona and Oregon State, but taking another loss here on the road at Arizona State. Yes, you're a better team than Arizona State. Yes, you'll be favored. No, I wouldn't be surprised if you get down there and beat them by 3 touchdowns. Here's the thing. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Mario Cristobal is still a young head coach, learning how to be a head coach. Same with some of the players on your team. I've got you winning some close games here probably. The USC game, the Stanford game. Auburn could go either way, even though I've got you losing. I think this is one of those games that sort of bites you where you look back on it and say, how did we lose that game? And again, that's something that happens to almost every single team in college football almost every single year. They lose at least one head-scratching game. For your case this year, I think it's on the road at Arizona State. That finishes you up at 9-3 with 2 losses in the Pac-12, which means you will have a chance to play in the Pac-12 title game. I think if it were to play out that way, I think your issue would be the loss to Washington, because I haven't done a preview on Washington yet. I'll probably get to that at some point. I don't think Washington can go 12-0 or probably can't even go 11-1. But I think they could go 10-2 type of thing where you both would have 2 conference losses. But since I have them beating you here, that would give them a tiebreaker edge into the title game. But anyway, we'll see. I mean, it all depends on the quarterback situation for Washington. If Eason doesn't pan out, they could go 8-4, and you could win the Pac-12 North even with a loss to Washington. So a lot of football between then and now. So anyway, that's it for the for the Oregon preview. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year, and sometimes, that's right, they're even watchable. Not this one, though. Have a good morning.
Forget 100% committed. I'm 1,000% committed. I do not care. I'm riding high on this sorry, sometimes sorry, college football team.